Welcome to Infinite Business Dynamics. Today, we're going to understand the Scrum framework from the big picture perspective that every PMP candidate should have. Instead of memorizing Scrum events individually, focus on how they work together as one integrated system for delivering value. Once this mental model is clear, many Agile questions in the PMP exam become much easier to answer. Everything begins with the product vision. The product vision defines the long-term direction of the product and the value it is expected to deliver. From the product vision comes the product backlog. The product backlog is a living, prioritized list of all the work that could add value to the product. It continuously evolves as new information and stakeholder feedback become available. Now here is one of the most important PMP exam concepts. The sprint is not just another Scrum event. The sprint is the container that holds all Scrum events. Many candidates incorrectly think Scrum consists of 5 separate meetings. That is not correct. Scrum consists of one container, the sprint, and 4 supporting events that occur within the sprint. The sprint lasts between 1 and 4 weeks, and its purpose is to create a valuable, usable product increment. The sprint begins with sprint planning. During sprint planning, the Scrum team determines what work can be completed during the sprint. The team establishes the sprint goal, which provides a single objective for the sprint, and creates the sprint backlog, which is the team's plan for achieving that goal. Think of the sprint goal as the team's compass. Every decision during the sprint should support achieving that goal. After planning, the team performs the development work. Every day, the developers conduct the Daily Scrum. This is a 15-minute event where they inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt their plan for the next 24 hours. The Daily Scrum is not a status meeting for management. Its purpose is to help the developers coordinate their work and keep the sprint on track. As development continues, the team produces a potentially releasable increment. Remember this important distinction for the PMP exam. The increment is not a Scrum event. It is a Scrum artifact. It represents completed work that satisfies the definition of done and is potentially ready for release. Near the end of the sprint, the Scrum team conducts the sprint review. The sprint review is much more than a product demonstration. Stakeholders inspect the increment, provide feedback, discuss changing business needs, and identify new opportunities. Based on this discussion, the product backlog may be updated. In simple terms, the sprint review improves the product. After the sprint review comes the sprint retrospective. This event focuses on the team's way of working rather than the product itself. The Scrum team reflects on what worked well, what could be improved, and identifies practical actions to become more effective during the next sprint. In simple terms, the sprint retrospective improves the process. Once the retrospective is complete, the updated product backlog feeds into the next sprint planning session, and a new sprint begins. This continuous cycle allows Scrum teams to inspect, adapt, and deliver value in short iterations. For the PMP exam, remember this simple flow. Product vision creates the product backlog. Sprint planning creates the sprint goal and the sprint backlog. Daily Scrum keeps the team aligned toward the sprint goal. Development work produces the product increment. Sprint review improves the product. Sprint retrospective improves the process. Then the cycle begins again with the next sprint. Finally, remember the Scrum mindset that PMI expects every PMP candidate to understand. Transparency enables inspection. Inspection enables adaptation. Adaptation enables continuous value delivery. Do not memorize Scrum as a collection of meetings. Instead, visualize it as one continuous system of planning, building, inspecting, learning, and improving. If you remember this single picture, you will not only answer Scrum questions with confidence, but you will also understand the Agile mindset that lies at the heart of the PMP exam.
Today, we're unpacking the precise, engineered architecture of Scrum events. Because instead of just memorizing a bunch of vocabulary, we really want to uncover the actual physics of value delivery and continuous adaptation together. It's going to be great. So, here is a quick look at our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the Agile paradigm shift, then explore empiricism, which is basically the operating system running the whole show. After that, we'll unpack the sprint container concept, map out the iteration engine flow, and finally, we'll apply all of this directly to mastering those tricky PMP exam distractors.
Okay, Section 1, the Agile paradigm shift.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty rules, we actually have to completely rewire how we think about team gatherings. Look, in the traditional corporate world, we hold meetings. And let's be totally honest, those usually involve staring blankly at a wall or a screen while just passively reporting your status to a manager. You might complain about some issues, sure, but often there are no clear commitments and attendance, kind of a revolving door. Well, a Scrum event is a completely different beast. The entire focus shifts to active, collective value creation. These events are mandatory, highly structured, and strictly time-boxed. They are designed specifically to enable process control. You're not just there to chat. You are there to produce defined, tangible outcomes and make clear, action-oriented decisions for the current iteration. Moving on to Section 2, Empiricism, the operating system. So if Agile is the vehicle, empiricism is the underlying operating system running it. It's the scientific mechanics powering this entire framework. Let's define this clearly because it's absolutely crucial. Empirical process control is all about making evidence-based decisions driven by real-time observation, rather than relying on rigid, upfront theories. In traditional project management, we often build this massive plan and just kind of assume things will go exactly as predicted. Empiricism completely flips that. Scrum relies strictly on what is actually happening right now in reality. And to make that reality-based system function, you need the 3 core pillars that anchor this whole process. First up is transparency. The process and the progress absolutely must be visible to everyone responsible for the outcome. No hidden reports, no secret silos, everything is right out in the open. Second is inspection. The team has to frequently check the Scrum artifacts and their progress toward the sprint goal, mainly so they can spot deviations early on. And third, adaptation. If during that inspection you realize things are drifting outside of acceptable limits, you have to adjust immediately. Not next month, not at the end of the project, immediately, so you minimize any further issues. Now, how do these events actually trigger those pillars? It's fascinating because every single event activates these concepts almost mathematically. Take sprint planning. It sparks transparency and inspection right out of the gate. The Daily Scrum, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective, they activate all 3 pillars, checking in, making things visible, and adapting the path forward. But think about the sprint itself, that overarching container. It natively supports and hosts all 3 pillars continuously over the entire execution cycle. It is literally the environment where empiricism breathes. Which brings us to Section 3, the sprint container concept. If you are studying for the modern PMP exam, pay close attention, because this is arguably the single most critical structural concept you need to internalize. Think of this like a box-in-a-box design. The sprint is a single 1 to 4 week overarching container event. It's the parent container that physically nests the other 4 supporting events right inside of it: planning, the daily scrum, the review, and the retrospective. They don't just happen randomly out in the wild. They exist systematically within the highly structured duration of that sprint container. The absolute crucial takeaway here is avoiding a trap so many candidates fall into. A super common misconception is that Scrum is just a series of 5 separate meetings that you toss onto a calendar. No way. The strict PMI standard, and honestly, the true reality of the Agile mindset, is that Scrum consists of 1 single container event, the sprint, and 4 distinct supporting events designed to inspect and adapt that specific container's progress. It's 1 time frame with 4 deliberate pit stops. All right, Section 4, the iteration engine flow. We know what the container is, but let's look at how it actually operates as a continuous heartbeat of value. When you trace this closed circular loop, the big realization is that absolutely nothing in Scrum exists in isolation. Each event acts as the mandatory structural preparation for the very next one. If you skip one, the engine stalls out. You plan, you execute and sync up, you release the increment, you demo it, you improve the process, and then boom, you immediately loop right back to start the next cycle. Let's distill this into a rapid chronological sequence so it's super easy to recall for your exam. Step 1, sprint planning. This is your goal setting. Step 2, the daily scrum. This is your daily developer sync. Step 3, the increment. That's the actual release of value. Step 4, the sprint review, the demo and feedback loop with stakeholders. And Step 5, the retrospective, the inward look to improve the team. Memorize this sequence, folks. It is the literal heartbeat of Agile execution. So why is this engine so incredibly efficient? It's because every single event systematically eliminates downstream waste. How? Well, every event is tied to a mandatory physical output. You aren't just in a room chatting. Sprint planning generates the sprint goal and the sprint backlog. The daily scrum outputs an updated, real-time daily work plan. The sprint review results in an updated product backlog driven by actual customer feedback. And the retrospective? It doesn't just result in a list of complaints. It generates direct actionable items for process improvement for the very next sprint. You are getting tangible value every single step of the way. Okay, Section 5. Mastering PMP Exam Distractors. Let's put all this theoretical architecture into practice, because scenario-based exam questions will absolutely try to trick you with some very specific red flags. A massive exam trap is calling the Daily Scrum a management reporting status meeting. It absolutely is not. It's a developer-owned synchronization event. Managers honestly don't even need to be there. Another classic distractor is claiming the Scrum Master assigns tasks. False. Developers pull their own work and self-manage. Or what about saying the retrospective is just a standard corporate lessons learned document you file away in a drawer? No way. It creates actionable process improvements for the immediate next sprint. If you can recognize these traps, you'll navigate those scenario questions with total confidence. All right, let's test this right now with a quick knowledge crucible challenge. Imagine you're sitting for your actual exam. Scenario challenge. Which Scrum event physically and structurally includes all the other events? Is it A, sprint review, B, sprint planning, C, a sprint, or D, the daily scrum? Think back to that box-in-a-box model we just covered. And the correct answer is, for sure, C, the sprint. Why? Because the sprint acts as the core container event within which all the other events systematically occur. Remember our golden rule here. Scrum does not have 5 standalone meetings. It has one major structural container iteration, the sprint, and 4 supporting process actions nested safely inside of it. Finally, our conclusion, the continuous cycle. Let's quickly lock in the core takeaways from today's explainer. First, remember, these are way more than just meetings. They are highly structured, value-added opportunities built purely on the physics of empiricism. Second, the container concept. The sprint is the core execution block hosting all the others. Third, continuous value. Every single event eliminates waste by demanding a mandatory, tangible output. And finally, strategic pipelines. Sprints dynamically prep the framework for the next iteration without any friction. The whole cycle just repeats, delivering value, inspecting reality, and adapting continuously. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. You now know the engineered mechanics required to pass the exam. But looking beyond the test, how will you actually apply this empirical mindset and this strict container framework to eliminate waste in your own teams tomorrow? Are your events driving tangible outputs, or are you just holding meetings? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.
Scrum events naturally align with globally recognized project management standards, making Scrum fully compatible with both the Agile Manifesto and PMBOK 7. On the left, the Agile Manifesto alignment is clear. The Daily Scrum promotes individuals and interactions. The sprint focuses on delivering working product increments. The sprint review encourages customer collaboration through regular feedback. Sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective together help teams continuously respond to change. On the right, Scrum also supports the PMBOK 7 principles. The sprint delivers value. The Daily Scrum and sprint review strengthen collaboration with stakeholders. Sprint planning enables adaptability, while the sprint and retrospective drive continuous quality improvement through inspection and adaptation. For the PMP exam, remember this key point. Scrum events are not just meetings. They are built-in mechanisms that naturally fulfill Agile values and support PMBOK 7 principles while delivering value through continuous inspection, adaptation, and stakeholder engagement.
This diagram shows the complete Scrum event flow. One of the most important concepts for the PMP exam is that Scrum is a continuous, iterative system. Every event prepares the next. Nothing in Scrum exists in isolation. The cycle begins with sprint planning. The Scrum team defines the sprint goal, selects product backlog items, and creates the sprint backlog. This establishes the plan for the sprint. Next, the developers build the product during the sprint. The objective is to create a valuable, potentially releasable increment. Every day during the sprint, the developers hold the Daily Scrum. This event helps them inspect progress toward the sprint goal, identify obstacles, and adjust their plan for the remaining work. By the end of the sprint, the team delivers an increment. The increment must meet the definition of done and provide potentially shippable business value. The sprint review follows. The Scrum team and stakeholders inspect the increment, gather feedback, and update future priorities based on business needs. After the review, the sprint retrospective focuses on improving the team's processes, collaboration, and effectiveness. The team identifies actionable improvements for the next sprint. The cycle then continues into the next sprint. The outcomes of the sprint review and sprint retrospective become valuable inputs for the next sprint planning session. This creates a continuous feedback loop that enables inspection, adaptation, and continuous improvement. For the PMP exam, remember this key concept. Scrum events are not independent meetings. They form one integrated cycle, where each event produces the inputs needed for the next event. This continuous flow enables teams to deliver value incrementally while responding quickly to change. Learning reinforcement.
When experienced project managers fail the Agile portion of the PMP exam, it is rarely because they lack vocabulary. It is usually because they try to map traditional, predictive project phases directly onto an Agile environment. This error shows up most clearly in how they view Scrum events. They look at a project schedule and assume these are standard, administrative corporate meetings. To correct this, we have to look past the calendar and examine the engineered architecture of Scrum. This breakdown highlights the structural differences. A traditional meeting exchanges passive status updates, discusses issues without commitment, and reports to a manager. Conversely, a Scrum event is a time-boxed opportunity for active value creation, driving action-oriented decisions tied to the current iteration. When a Scrum event is treated like a passive meeting, the Agile framework loses its mechanism to adapt. On the modern PMP exam, failing to adapt means failing the scenario. When a team abandons rigid, upfront project planning, they lose their traditional predictive safety net. To maintain control over the product, they must deploy a different operating system. That operating system is empirical process control, or empiricism. Rather than making decisions based on unverified theories, the team makes evidence-based decisions driven by real-time observation. This diagram illustrates empiricism's three non-negotiable pillars. First is transparency. Progress must be fully visible, with no hidden reports. Second is inspection, frequently checking artifacts to detect deviations early. Third is adaptation, adjusting immediately when processes deviate outside acceptable limits. These events function as the physical scaffolding that activates the three pillars in a real-world environment. To see how these pillars operate in practice, we need to analyze how the events are physically organized. This heat map maps the core Scrum events against the three pillars. You can see exactly which specific events trigger transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Notice the bottom row. There is a foundational concept that hosts all of these triggers over the entire cycle, the sprint. The most common assumption is that Scrum consists of 5 separate, disconnected meetings. The sprint is the singular, overarching container event. It provides a boundary, a time box of 1 to 4 weeks, enclosing the entire execution cycle. This blueprint illustrates the relationship. The other 4 supporting events exist within the duration of this container. Planning, the Daily Scrum, the review, and the retrospective are designed to inspect and adapt the progress occurring inside that boundary. The sprint is a rigid boundary that forces the team to create integrated, inspected output cycles before the time runs out. Let's look inside that container boundary to see how this iteration engine turns. This circular map displays the anatomy of an iteration flow. It shows that nothing in Scrum exists in isolation. Each event prepares the structure for the next. It starts with sprint planning. Here, the team sets the iteration goal and creates the scoped backlog of work. Next is execution, driven by the Daily Scrum. This is a 24-hour repeating loop where developers realign their active pathways and collaboratively build the product. That execution leads to release and demo. The team delivers the potentially shippable increment and holds the sprint review to directly sync with stakeholders and inspect that product. Finally, the cycle hits the retrospective. Before restarting the loop, the team runs an internal assessment of their health, process safety, and mechanics. When you stack these single iterations sequentially over time, you establish a steady biological heartbeat. Consistent cadences drive predictable iterations of value. The continuous delivery of value is the mechanical result of this unbroken, spinning iteration engine. Because this engine is designed to deliver continuous value, every single Scrum event must produce a physical output. This table breaks down exactly what each event is mandated to generate. The overarching output of the sprint itself is the ultimate goal, an integrated, fully tested product increment. To achieve that, sprint planning outputs the sprint goal and the active sprint backlog. Then, the Daily Scrum outputs an updated, real-time daily work plan to guide the developers. This chart outlines the common misconceptions candidates select when they lack an agile mindset. Options often describe the Daily Scrum as a management reporting status meeting. It is a developer-owned synchronization event where the team pulls work and self-manages. You will see the sprint review described as a formal customer sign-off gate. In reality, it is a collaborative inspection and feedback session. The retrospective is frequently presented as a corporate lessons learned report. It actually creates actionable process improvements for the immediate next iteration. Applying this to a situational exam challenge, if a scenario asks which event primarily improves the team's way of working, the answer is the sprint retrospective. The review focuses on the product, while the retrospective targets the team's processes, relationships, and environmental quality. If asked which event structurally includes all the others, the answer is the sprint. Remembering that Scrum has one container iteration rather than 5 standalone meetings eliminates the distractors. Mastering Agile for the modern PMP exam requires moving past a basic glossary of terms and internalizing the mechanics of this closed-loop, value-delivering architecture.